Today is day 2 of this 7-day seshin here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico. And I hope you can hear. I unmuted, so it should be possible for all of you to be able to hear. And we are recording the Teisho as well, just in case. Have not yet been able to get yesterday's Teisho up onto YouTube, but we will be able to do that fairly soon, I hope. And yesterday, I shared some of the teaching of Huangpo, also known as Obaku in Japanese. China has had a written language for millennia, actually, and Japan not so long. And in fact, Japan's language is based on the Chinese characters, the pictographs that were developed in China. They've since been updated, altered, simplified, both in China and in Japan. So nowadays, they're not so quite so similar. In the 11th century, when Chinese Buddhist monks were coming to Japan, they were communicating with the Japanese monks through written language. And this is one reason why calligraphy has been such an important part of Japanese Zen and Chinese Zen as well. And as you can see, we have a calligraphy above the altar. My head is in the way, so you can't read it, but what it reads, translated, is out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. And at the very top, you can see the enso, which represents our true nature, perfect, whole, and complete. Nothing can be added. If you try to subtract something, it's not a circle anymore. Innate perfection is our natural way of being, our natural foundation. But out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. How can that be? It's something to ponder. So let me share again this teaching of Huangpo, the Chinese Chan master of the 9th century in Tang Dynasty, China. This is out of a book called The Enlightened Mind, a number of translations of spiritual truths from all over the world, basically, from all over a wide variety of religions. And here we will speak, share the words of Huangpo. This pure mind, which is the source of all things, out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. This pure mind, which is the source of all things, shines forever with the radiance of its own perfection. But most people are not aware of it and think that mind is just the faculty that sees, hears, feels, and knows. Blinded by their own sight, hearing, feeling, and knowing, they don't perceive the radiance of the source. The radiance of the source that is from which we arise. Seemingly separate, but not really so. If they could eliminate all conceptual thinking, the source would appear. And it's not like permanently eliminate conceptual thinking. It's drop beneath conceptual thinking. And the way we do that is through the extended out-breath. Because as we extend the out-breath far enough to really become Susok'kan, or the extended out-breath, naturally everything else drops away because we cannot focus on extending the out breath, the experience of extending the out breath without letting everything else go. Of course, we can multitask, pretending that we're doing Susok'kan by breathing out so far, but that's not really Susok'kan. The whole purpose of the extended out breath is to help us drop attachment to everything. And the thing is, that can seem frightening if we're not attached, for example, to our family. How's it going to be? Are we going to be numb? Are they not going to get the support and the care that they deserve? That's not how it is. When we drop attachment to how we assume things are, including who we assume we are, then out of that can arise the perfect behavior in each moment without having to think it. And it's not like becoming a zombie. It is becoming so alive and so real that there is joy in life. And there is ease in life. And there is profound understanding in life, profound empathy. This is our natural way of being, which unfortunately has been covered up through a very long time of conditioning, basically our entire life of conditioning. We spoke before at the beginning of the seshin about how cultures, or the subculture that we live in, has many definitions of how a person of that subculture must be in order to be accepted. And this includes belief systems, it includes appearances. There are many, seemingly to us probably in Western civilization, curious ways of people's values. And I think here of when we lived in Burma, Myanmar, there was a group of a culture of hill tribe people who put great stock in elongated necks, to the point where they actually added rings. This is for women only. They added rings as a person grew, as a young woman grew, and increased the rings until the neck was actually quite tall. And what in effect was happening was that they were dislocating the neck bones. And when people were punished with death, the way to make that possible was to order that their neck rings would be removed, and then there was no support for their head, and it would flop over, and they would asphyxiate. This was admired, these extended necks. There are other cultures, for example, in Japan, where a long neck in a woman is considered beautiful, but they don't go to the extent where the Hill tribe folks in Myanmar do, where they actually create a very extended long neck. There are African tribes that bind the heads of children so that they have an elongated head, which is considered to be beautiful. There was the tradition in China until fairly recently. And when we lived in Myanmar, in Mandalay, I remember seeing a Chinese woman who had obviously had bound feet, there where they bind the feet of a wealthy child, female child, so that they, even as the child grows, it's a terribly painful thing. The foot gets terribly deformed, so that it looks extremely tiny. And the whole point in this is to make it obvious that this child is growing in a culture, a subculture that is so wealthy, they don't need to work. And it's kind of curious, this has come down to us in Zen, in Japanese Zen, in that our robe sleeves, which are modeled on Sung Dynasty Chinese robes, are very long. And this is another cultural thing in China, or was. It's not prevalent anymore as far as I know, that if your sleeves were so long, that proved that you were wealthy enough. You didn't need to work, because actually it was quite difficult to work with long sleeves. You really couldn't do manual labor very easily if your sleeves were too long. And the same thing with, oddly enough, fingernails. In Japan, or in China, there was a culture of allowing your fingernails to grow and grow and grow and grow, and they would curl around. Again, the idea being a demonstrated wealth in your background that prevented the necessity of working. I'm not quite sure how they did basic things like eat with such long curved fingernails. And there are other places, in fact, in Buddhism, until fairly recently, and oddly, this is mimicked in Japan in the Japanese mafia, although for a different reason. In Chinese Buddhism and in contemporary Chinese Buddhist master Xu Yun, who died a year after being severely beaten by the Red Guards, the Chinese communist Red Guards, at 119. He, at a certain point, much younger, chopped off one of his fingers to supposedly requite his debt of gratitude for his parents, and also to demonstrate that he had no attachment to his body. As I said, the Japanese mafia do it for a different reason. I think it has something to do with loyalty. So we have a lot of things that we do, mostly unconsciously or subconsciously, because they're so commonplace and so expected in our cultures, we don't even question them. And yet they're just as odd in some ways as those examples I've just been relating to you. And we get deeply invested in these personas. And that investment costs. We get stressed. We get anxious. In some cases, we even get so depressed if we feel that we're a failure that we even resort to suicide. It's a sad state of affairs. At the same time, to blend with the society that we are part of, the subculture we are part of, is it seems, according to cultural anthropologists, that it actually may be genetically programmed. And that is for our own survival. And there's a saying about Japanese culture: if a nail sticks up, it's hammered down. The culture is one of homogeneity. And of course, there are subgroups. Artists, for example, are kind of a different subgroup, but they have their own culture as well. And it's less prominent, but nonetheless still effective in Western cultures, that when we don't, quote, fit in, close quote, with the prevailing view of our subculture, we are sometimes treated rather badly. And it is sad, because human beings have such a wide range of humanity. Out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. A million different versions of a human being. living, speaking, acting. It's quite amazing. So back to Wang Po. Blinded by their own sight, hearing, feeling, and knowing, they don't perceive the radiance of the source. If they could eliminate all conceptual thinking, and again, this is just a temporary thing, we don't go around mindlessly. Our thinking mind is an asset, but when it is paramount and knocks everything else out of the water, then it's like the sorcerer's apprentice. It's out of hand. It is causing problems. If they could eliminate all conceptual thinking, this source would appear like the sun rising through the empty sky and illuminating the whole universe. Therefore, you students of the Tao, who seek to understand through seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, when your perceptions are cut off, I don't know if that's an accurate translation there. I don't think it means to shut down your perceptions. It means to go inward and let go the yada yada in the mind, the assumption of who we are, the maintenance of a self-image, which actually can be quite frightening until we are able to do it and understand the amazement that comes forth from opening to that radiant source. Your mind will be cut off and you will find nowhere to enter. Just realize that although the mind is manifested in these perceptions, it is neither part of them nor separate from them. But you shouldn't seek the one mind apart from them. Don't hold on to them or leave them behind or dwell in them or reject them. Above, below, and around you, all things spontaneously exist because there is nowhere outside the Buddha mind. Spontaneously exist. Out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. He also said, your true nature is not lost in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It was never born and can never die. It shines through the whole universe, filling emptiness, one with emptiness. It is without time or space and has no passions, actions, ignorance, or knowledge. But there are no things, no people, and no Buddhas. It contains not the smallest hairbreadth of anything that exists objectively. It depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, radiant beauty. Absolute reality, self-existent and uncreated. How then can you doubt that the Buddha has no mouth to speak with and nothing to teach, or that the truth is learned without learning, or who is there to learn it? A jewel beyond price. Out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. And here within this view, you see two people, two human beings. You see the wall at the front of the zendo. You see the part of the altar. You see the lamp here. And of course, this nothingness that we are is also solid flesh. And it's important not to assume that if you realize profound awakening, that you can walk out into the middle of a freeway and not be flattened by a speeding truck. The thing that is or can be frightening as we move closer to a level of insight that one could consider to be kensho or a type of awakening, fear can come up because we have invested a great deal. We have been conditioned to value the self-image that we exhibit, let's put it that way. And if we do not maintain this self-image, if we are not this self-image, then what are we? Will we disappear? Will we not exist? How will we know how to behave? And yet, over millennia, people have come to awakening, increasingly deeper awakening. And that is something that is important to remember, that awakening comes in degrees. And a single awakening is not the end all and be all. We need to continue to deepen the practice and open to increasing broader, deeper view of reality. And through that, an instinctive understanding arises in each moment of how to behave. It may or may not be what we expect it should be or want it to be, but in my experience, it is always right. There's no question about it. At its basis is profound presence. And that requires, as a metaphor, leaving the guard in the gatehouse, giving him a break. In fact, maybe even sending him off to a different job, and daring to not have to have that self-protection. It's kind of interesting, and I wouldn't advise trying to replicate this, but at Sogenji, when I was training there, certain times of the year, Sanzen would begin while it was still pitch black dark. And the path between the Zendo and the Kohojo, which was the room where we would wait for Sanzen, was quite extensive and had many obstacles. There were sharp turns. There was a raised, very uneven, very wide stone walkway. There were stone lanterns. There were very small little azalea bushes that are so tiny that you could easily trip over them. And actually, one night, I was racing to Sanzen with enough presence that I instinctively leapt over one of these little azalea bushes that I couldn't see because it was so dark. It is interesting how the mind is far more than we assume it is. And to explore and to open to increasing awareness of this phenomenal mind is a tremendous gift. I'd like to share now just a little bit of some Tibetan teaching. This is a teaching of I think he's a 10th century Tibetan master named Longchenpa, highly regarded in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And this is a book that is quite amazing, called You Are the Eyes of the World. And that in itself is a teaching. I'd like to share this part of it. This is called The Play of Experience. All experiences and life forms cannot be proven to exist independently of there being a presence before your mind, just like a lucid dream. All that is has me, universal creativity, pure and total presence. Pure and total presence as its root. How things appear is my being. How things arise is my manifestation. Sounds and words heard are my messages expressed in sounds and words. All the capacities, forms, and pristine awarenesses of the Buddhas, the bodies of sentient beings, their habituations, and so forth, all environments and their inhabitants, life forms and experiences, are the primordial state of pure and total presence, are the total and pure presence. This is our own mind. This is fundamentally who we are. This is the radiant source that Huang Po spoke of. This is out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. And the reason for sharing this with you is to hopefully inspire you to offer an openness to possibility as you extend the out-breath far enough that your ordinary way of thinking, being, assuming is let go of in the process of extending the out-breath. And with that sense of openness to possibility, not assuming anything about what you might or might not experience, not assuming anything about how things might or might not be, but open to possibility, a deep, profound presence. As you continue to use this way of practice, it is amazing what you will realize. And it is not, as we said before, like sort of practicing a piece on the piano, where initially you can read the music, perhaps, if you've been studying music, and you start playing and you make mistakes, and as you keep practicing, you get better at it, and one day you can play the piece without any mistakes at all. It's not like that. There is no obvious timeline. There is no obvious sense of milestones. It is why faith is so vital for practice. But I can promise you that if you continue practicing in that way just described, your life will open amazingly. That said, it's also important to mention that anyone who has suffered what are known as adverse childhood experiences or trauma even as adults will find that the buried sensory experience of those traumas will begin to be uncovered as part of this practice. And when that happens, it's important to work with a qualified trauma therapist to safely and helpfully be guided into working through these things so that they no longer pull your strings in the background. So you'll no longer have reactions to life circumstances that are really results of unfinished trauma processing. But for anyone with without that level of trauma, I would like to share one more thing from the same teaching, and that is how to work with challenging feelings that come up anytime, whether it's during your zazen or otherwise. And of course, during zazen, it is possible because we're we're kind of reducing the background noise, that there will be challenging feelings come up. And here is what Longchenpa teaches, which interestingly, modern psychotherapy has finally awakened to and has found it really works. This is titled, "The Passions Are Intrinsically Freed. Though attachment, aversion, dullness, pride, and envy," we could add to that anger, irritation, frustration, sadness, any number of human emotions may arise, fully understand their inner energy. In other words, don't think about them. Don't try to analyze them. Fully understand their inner energy. The body sense in your body, the various vibrations or tensions in your body. Recognize them in the very first moment before karma has been accumulated, before you zip up into your head to escape. In the second moment, look nakedly at this state and relax in its presence. Then, whichever of the five passions arise becomes a pure presence, freed in its own place without being eliminated. It emerges as the pristine awareness that is clear, pleasurable, and not conditioned by thought. This is profoundly effective. Let me share it again, and if anybody would like to have a copy of this, email me and I will send it to you as a PDF. Though attachment, aversion, dullness, pride, and envy may arise, fully understand their inner energy. Their energy. Not what they mean, not what you think about, but what they feel like energetically in your body. Recognize them in their very first moment before karma has been accumulated, before you act on it. We act on these emotions in order to escape the feeling in our body. But if you tune into the feeling in your body, there is no need to escape. And so karma isn't accumulated. You're not lashing out in anger or any of the other things that could be the result of how you feel. In the second moment, look nakedly at this state and relax in its presence. Tune in. Allow yourself to explore what the energy of what you would call anger, for example, or sadness, or frustration actually feels like in your body. Most of us don't know what that is, because as soon as we begin to have that sensation arise, we try to escape it. Then whichever of the five passions arise becomes a pure presence, freed in its own place without being eliminated, because it doesn't have to be eliminated. It is immediately processed through. When we don't interrupt that energy and make it stored in our body to pile up and become a real bomb when it's triggered, if it piles up to a certain degree. That if we experience it in the moment, sensory-wise, the felt sense, then it won't build up, because it will dissolve and be freed without it having to be illuminated. It emerges as the pristine awareness that is clear, pleasurable, and not conditioned by thought. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.